Okay, let's get started with AssetsBridge. So first things first, once you have the plugin installed and enabled, you'll notice at the top here you get these 5 new buttons that are effectively configured. Okay, so once you do any operation, essentially without configuring AssetsBridge, it should bring you up the settings menu. If it doesn't, you can obviously just click it. With the default configuration here, there's 2 important settings. One is your actual content route on where all the actual content will be managed, and you can see there's a pop-up describing what they are effectively for within your content directory in Unreal Engine. And then the second one is where your assets will live on a physical directory or folder on your machine. Okay. So you can see here there's content/assets. As an example, I'm going to create a new one and I'm going to say new folder, and I'll just continue and say assets. Okay. Second part is where you're going to be exporting items to. So for this one, as soon as I click this actual browse icon, you'll see it brings up a folder. And the folder looks like this. You can see it says select folder on where you want to actually have the data. So on my D drive, excuse me, I have a 3D world folder where I keep all of my 3D items, including my texture. So underneath here, for example, I'm going to create a AssetsBridge folder. Okay. So double click that one and select the folder. Now you can see it's saved here as the D drive, 3D World AssetsBridge. Now you are technically configured and ready to go. So let's first step into the actual icons. First icon that's effectively here, if you hover over it, it's the bridge in action. This allows you to read a AssetsBridge file if one exists and bring in the content that is within that file. We'll talk about the AssetsBridge file in a second. I'm just going to go through the actual icons first. Second to that is the snatch function. This I built in because it became super useful, especially when working with content packs. This will allow you to grab a specific item, put it in your assets location. That way you can modify it without affecting the original item. And you can reuse it. Set it, and we'll walk through that shortly as well. The settings one is self-explanatory. That is effectively the ability for you to configure AssetsBridge and where to export and how to export items. The next one is effectively swap. The swap function effectively allows you to take any item that you have selected here and any other item that is selected and then swap the item. This makes it very, very simple. You can see it just swapped it there. It requires you to highlight one thing in the content browser and one thing in the viewport, and allows you to quick switch those items. Alright, so I'm going to undo here, leave that as the default. The final item here is the bridge export. So this export function allows you to actually take a specific item, whether it is selected in the viewport or selected in the content browser. One important part here is if you want to export something that is in the content browser specifically, you cannot have anything highlighted in the actual viewport. So you'll have to click something and then hit escape. Then click something inside the content browser and then click bridge export. Okay. So you can see it wrote this particular file now. So inside my content browser, you can see underneath here, oops, different folder. So AssetsBridge is the folder that I created. It creates a JSON file. So as I referenced earlier on, this is the actual file that is there. So AssetsBridge by itself is a utility function that allows you to export meshes, static meshes, skeletal meshes into a directory in a very efficient manner and it brings in all of that information back in if you decide to bridge it in, and we'll get into the bridge in shortly as well. So what happened here is if I open AssetsBridge and I bring in a text editor so you can see what's there, this is the information that's in here. I exported the cylinder. It gives me the information of the actual materials, what its locations were in world space, as well as the short names and so on and so forth. Okay, this is especially useful once we bridge something back into Unreal. Okay, so let me take that out of the way. Now what it did do is, because I set the AssetsBridge as the root folder, it created a level prototyping and then the actual measures folder underneath here, so it replicates my actual content browser, and then you can see is the actual object. That being said, item is now exported, okay, because that actual file was written. So let's actually take a better example. So I'm going to take my let's do the chamfer cube. Bring it up, drop it to the floor, and now we're going to say exported. Okay, so now the file is exported. Now I can go to my 3D application like Blender. So I'm going to bring Blender in here. I'm going to say file, I'm going to say import, FBX file, go to my D drive, and then I go to 3D world, AssetsBridge, level prototyping. There's the chamfer cube that was created. I can import it, and then you can see it's imported just like you would normally do it. Now's where the special part effectively happens. There is a free Blender specific add-on that I created that is available underneath my GitHub repository. Here we go. This is the AssetsBridge add-on for Blender. You can see underneath here you can install it, but go to releases, the latest release that's currently available. Click on the first AssetsBridge zip file, download it, then go into Blender in order to install it. So edit, preferences, add-ons, install one, install that particular zip file as an add-on. So in order to configure the AssetsBridge add-on, we'll search for asset. That'll bring the AssetsBridge. So the important part here is you can see there is a browse to the AssetsBridge task file. Okay, so this is the one that we just created, which was just created on behalf of us from Unreal Engine. So we're going to browse to it. My actual one that I want to use in this example is AssetsBridge, and you can see there's the JSON file. Okay, so accept that one. Now the AssetsBridge add-on is properly configured. So save preferences, and then when we import something at this point in time, so I'm going to create a new file completely, so we can do this from scratch. General, don't save. Now with AssetsBridge enabled at the top right hand over here, I can just click import objects. That creates collections for me in the exact same manner. Okay, so I'm going to zoom into it. You can see it is effectively created with the exact same offset as that which it was within world space. So at this point in time, you can see the offset is over here, and it did the same thing within Blender. Okay, I'm gonna make a couple of edits quickly to this cube just so we can import it again. Please note I am not a 3D designer, so I am really not good at doing anything 3D related, as some of you I'm sure are. So I'm going to take those two, these two. Let's just do the three faces that's here and set them slightly more. Okay, I'm gonna inset them, and then I'm gonna take each of these faces individually and set that one, extrude that one, And then let's do another insert. Extrude inwards on this one. Okay. So now next part is I'm just going to select everything. I'm going to go to my UV editing. Since I just made large modifications to this, I want to just do a basic UV unwrap. I'm not going to actually deal with the UVs. I'm just going to unwrap them since I made those changes now. Actually, to make it show up a little bit better, just go into edit mode. Oops. Go to mark seams. Shift R. Shift R. Let's just make some islands quickly. Make it look good. That's all. Okay. And then the rest will be just a regular cube. Okay. So UV, unwrap. And at this point in time, I'm going to quickly save the file. Just going to overwrite my test file, and now I'm going to click the actual file, and I'm going to say export selected. Okay, you can see it processed the actual mesh, then exported it, and overwrote the original task file that was there. So if I bring this over, you can see it did update this. So one quick note here. There is a limitation in the location. So the world data in terms of Blender will have overwritten the pivot point to a certain degree. That is something that will be fixed in a future version. For right now, if you import it, it's going to import a change to the actual pivot point. But I'll skip over that for now, as it will be addressed in the near future. So, getting back to AssetsBridge itself, I have now made that modification. Whoops, that's some old stuff I just tested out. One quick note, when we were initially exporting this particular file, if I browse to the actual asset, you can see it's underneath the level prototyping meshes folder. When I did the bridge export, because my settings state that I want all of the files to be underneath this base directory, when I click the import, it will come in underneath content, assets, level prototyping. This is also where a snatch function will put those particular meshes. Okay, so I'm going to do show you an example here. When I now click bridge in for the import, you can see this file that I exported effectively remains exactly the same. However, if we go to our content assets, level prototyping meshes, you can see here's the updated mesh that was created within Blender, and it's actually at the offset location where we had it before, with the pivot point changed. So you can see it looks exactly the same way we had it in Blender, and I now have the ability to, I'll close these out quickly, come in, and I can say take this particular object, swap it. Now you can say, see, because that pivot point is offset incorrectly, it will offset it based on that actual relative location. But the function actually works just fine now. So now I have the ability to quickly iterate on my meshes that exist within Unreal Engine. I can quickly export, I can import, I can swap items between different meshes. So if I bring this mesh and I say no, I want that to be a ramp, I can now just swap it and it flipped that particular item with an actual ramp. So this is the intent behind AssetsBridge, is to make your life as a world editor, level designer, content manager, much simpler, and it makes it much easier, in my opinion, to do level prototyping. Now, second part to this, which is my favorite part, is effectively characters. You can take the mannequins and specifically all of the Unreal Engine related items will also work. And because Blender has a weirdness in how it deals with the transform, when you export it and bring it into Unreal Engine, that was my goal, to actually fix the import into Unreal Engine. So if I take Manny and I do an export, actually let me just hit escape so nothing is selected here. Click on Manny, do the export. Okay, export's now complete. If I go to Unreal Engine, I can come in and I can say import objects. You can see there's Manny. If we go to Manny, which is over here, let's click home on him and then zoom in. You can see he's positioned well as well. Now the problem that normally happens with an export is you actually have to reorder all of these things. You can see it automatically did all of that for you. So now when I go in and I can say, okay, let's just make a change to the head. So I'm going to select, go into sculpting. Let's just take the first item up here. Make him a nice big, make him a unicorn. Why not? Yeah, looks good. Looks good to me. Okay. So we're gonna take this and then go back to our layout. Now when I select my Manny object that's effectively here, I can say, I'm just gonna quickly save my file in case Blender dies. Like export selected. You can see it exported it now. When I get back to Unreal Engine, I can say bridge in, that'll import Manny. Then when we go underneath characters, mannequins, meshes, and then when we look at Manny, look at that beautiful head. And there's our model. And you can see it works just fine. And it's just chilling now with a nice big bump on his head. Model itself for the materials will have to be assigned if it's your second import. The materials should be maintained just fine. The first iteration of AssetsBridge skeletal meshes are a little hard to work with, but this effectively makes the process of importing and exporting easier. You would, within the first few versions, just have to manually assign the materials. If you have any specific questions or you'd like to see changes or new improvements made to the actual application, please let me know and I'm happy to take care of it. Thanks.